The soft blue glow of multiple screens filled the massive circular chamber. Hundreds of aliens from different species worked at their stations, all focused on the same impossible problem that had haunted their civilizations for over 3 centuries. The ring equations hung in the air above them, projected in massive holographic detail, their complexity mocking every attempt at solution. Gray stood at his desk, his 4 eyes burning from staring at the numbers for too long. As the lead mathematician of the Stellar Alliance, he had spent 15 years of his life trying to crack these equations. His silver skin had lost its shine, and his normally neat head tendrils drooped with exhaustion. He watched as another simulation failed, the 47th that day. Running simulation attempt number 2,467,844, announced the central computer in its calm voice. The number felt like a personal insult to everyone in the chamber. Around him, mathematicians from 47 different species continued their work, though the hope in their movements had long since faded. The ring equations weren't just any mathematical problem. They held the key to stable wormhole technology, the holy grail of space travel. Current methods of faster-than-light travel worked, but they were expensive, slow, and dangerous. A working solution to the ring equations would change everything. It would connect the galaxy in ways previously thought impossible. Lead mathematician Gray called out one of his assistants, a floating blob of transparent gel named Blue. The latest attempt shows a 0.03% improvement over our last failure. Blue tried to sound excited, but even this tiny improvement after months of work felt hollow. Gray nodded, his head tendrils swaying slightly. "Document it with the others," he said. His voice carried the weight of 15 years of failed attempts. He remembered his first day on the project, full of confidence that he would be the one to solve what thousands before him could not. Now, he understood their failure intimately. The chamber's walls displayed the history of attempts. The first ones came from the Stellar Alliance's finest minds 300 years ago. Then the Crystal Collective joined, bringing their quantum computing expertise. The plant consciousness added their unique perspective on space-time manipulation. Every species that joined the galactic community took their shot at the equations. Every species failed. A soft chime indicated the end of another work cycle. Most of the mathematicians began to pack up their things, their movements automatic after countless similar days. Gray stayed at his station, adjusting variables that he had adjusted thousands of times before. "You should rest," Blue suggested, floating closer. "The equations will still be unsolved tomorrow." Gray's upper eyes blinked while his lower ones remained fixed on the screen. "That's what I'm afraid of," he said. 300 years, Blue. 300 years of the brightest minds in the galaxy, and we're still no closer to a solution than when we started. He gestured at the massive equations floating above them. "Look at them. They're beautiful in their complexity. Every time we think we understand one aspect, 3 more variables reveal themselves. It's like the equations are alive, evolving to escape our understanding." The central computer began its end-of-cycle backup, its lights creating patterns on the chamber's floor. Gray watched the light show, remembering something one of his teachers had told him. The universe doesn't create unsolvable problems. But after 15 years, he was starting to doubt that wisdom. The night shift began to arrive, a smaller but equally dedicated group of researchers. They would continue the work, running simulations, testing theories, and adding to the massive database of failed attempts. Gray finally stepped away from his station, his joints stiff from standing too long. As he walked toward the exit, he passed the wall of contributors, a massive display showing the names of everyone who had worked on the ring equations. Some names belonged to species that had gone extinct while trying to solve the problem. Others belonged to civilizations that had simply given up and withdrawn from the galactic community in frustration. Outside the chamber, through the massive windows, he could see the galactic core glowing in the distance. Somewhere out there, he thought, someone must have the answer. But after 3 centuries of failure, even Gray was starting to believe that some problems were simply beyond solving. Little did he know that the solution would come from a direction no one in the galaxy could have predicted, and it would arrive sooner than anyone thought possible. The news spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. Humans had achieved faster than light travel, not through the ring equations, but through their own unique method. It wasn't elegant or efficient, but it worked. They had basically strapped massive engines to their ships and brute forced their way through space-time. Tom Baker stood in front of the council chambers, trying not to show how impressed he was by the massive alien architecture. As Earth's first representative to the Galactic Council, he wore his best suit and carried a tablet containing humanity's collected scientific knowledge. The chamber doors were 3 times his height and made of a material that seemed to shift colors as he watched. Representative Baker, the council speaker's voice boomed through the chamber. Your species has achieved what many thought impossible for your level of development. Please, tell us how humans managed this feat. Tom cleared his throat. Well, he said with a small smile, we really wanted to meet our neighbors, and we got tired of waiting. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Some seemed amused, others confused by his simple answer. He continued, our scientists figured if we couldn't find a shortcut through space, we'd just have to push harder until space gave way. He pulled up some diagrams on his tablet. We call it the hammer drive. It's not pretty, but it gets the job done. The alien scientists in the chamber studied the designs with a mixture of horror and fascination. One of them, a tall being with silver skin and 4 eyes, spoke up. You just forced your way through, without solving the underlying mathematical principles. That's the human way sometimes, Tom replied. If the front door is locked, we check the windows. If they're locked too, we might just make our own door. The council members exchanged looks. This was not how things were usually done in galactic society. There were procedures, theories, proper ways of doing things. These humans had ignored all of that and somehow succeeded anyway. As the council discussed among themselves, Tom noticed something on one of the chamber's walls, a massive holographic display of complex equations. His eyes widened as he studied them. They reminded him of something he'd seen before, but he couldn't quite place it. Excuse me, he said, pointing at the display. What are those equations? The silver-skinned alien turned all 4 eyes toward him. Those are the ring equations. They've remained unsolved for 300 years. Every species in the galaxy has tried to crack them. They hold the key to perfect wormhole travel. Tom pulled out his tablet again and took some pictures. Would you mind if I shared these with our scientists back home? We might want to take a crack at them. The aliens looked at each other again. The council speaker made a sound that might have been a laugh. Of course, Representative Baker, many have tried. The ring equations have defeated the finest minds of 47 species, but you are welcome to attempt their solution. Tom sent the equations to Earth immediately, along with a message. Hey everyone, look what I found at my first council meeting. Apparently these are impossible to solve. Thought you might find them interesting. As the council meeting continued, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchange programs, Tom's tablet quietly buzzed with responses from Earth. Universities around the world were already looking at the equations, but it was a message from an unexpected source that caught his eye. Mr. Baker, it read, these equations look a lot like the physics engine from Portal Infinity. We might have some ideas. Could you get us more details about previous solution attempts? Tom smiled to himself. The aliens hadn't yet learned that humans had a secret weapon when it came to solving impossible problems. They made games out of them. For decades, humans had been turning complex physics and mathematical challenges into entertainment. As he left the council chambers that day, Tom felt a strange mix of excitement and amusement. The aliens had spent 3 centuries approaching this problem with all the seriousness and formality it deserved. But sometimes the best solutions came from playing around and having fun. He looked back at the equations one more time before the doors closed. The aliens thought these equations were unbeatable, but they hadn't met humans yet, and humans had a long history of breaking games just for fun. Professor Anna White stared at her computer screen, rubbing her tired eyes. The ring equations had been circulating through Earth's scientific community for 3 days now, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd seen something like them before. The math was incredibly complex, but there was something familiar about the patterns. Her office walls were covered with printouts of the equations, each section highlighted in different colors. Empty coffee cups littered her desk. She had barely slept since receiving the equations, but it wasn't frustration keeping her awake. It was excitement. A notification popped up on her screen. Someone had posted a new comment in the Global Science Forum, where researchers were discussing the equations. It was from an unexpected source, a gaming forum. She almost ignored it, but the attached image caught her eye. The post showed a side-by-side comparison of the ring equations and something called portal physics sequence breaks from a popular game. The similarity was striking. Anna quickly typed the game's name into a search engine and found herself diving into a world she never knew existed. Hours of video footage showed gamers doing impossible things in virtual spaces. They called it speedrunning, completing games as quickly as possible by exploiting the underlying physics engines. These players weren't just playing the games, they were breaking them apart and rebuilding them, finding patterns that the original designers never intended. Anna picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she'd need for professional reasons. "Jack," she said when her nephew answered, "you still run that gaming channel, right? The one about breaking physics engines?" "Aunt Anna." "Yeah, I do. What's up?" Jack sounded surprised to hear from her. "I need you to look at something, and I need you to get your community involved." She sent him the equations, stripped of their classified markings. "Does this look familiar to anyone who works with portal physics in games?" Jack was quiet for a moment as he looked at the equations. "Holy, these look just like the quantum tunneling calculations from Portal Infinity. We've been solving similar stuff for years, just, to go fast in games." Within hours, Anna's inbox was flooded with messages from an entirely new kind of researcher. Gamers who had spent years breaking down physics engines were sending her detailed analyses of the equations. They weren't traditional mathematicians, but they understood spatial mathematics in a way few others did. One message stood out. It came from a group of speedrunners who had found a way to clip through the equations using techniques they'd developed for games. They didn't use standard mathematical language, but their insights were revolutionary. "You're not supposed to solve the whole equation," their message read. "You're supposed to trick it into thinking it's solved. Look at this pattern. It's just like wall clipping in Portal Infinity. The space-time field doesn't need to be stable everywhere, just in the spots you're using." Anna brought up the equations again, this time looking at them through the lens of someone trying to break the system, rather than solve it properly. The gamers were right. Everyone had been trying to create a perfect solution, but maybe that wasn't necessary. She quickly organized a video call with leading mathematicians and the gaming community. At first, the two groups could barely communicate. They used completely different terminology. But as they began to understand each other, something magical happened. The mathematicians provided the theoretical framework, while the gamers provided the practical experience of breaking similar systems. Together, they started seeing patterns that neither group could have spotted alone. "It's like speedrunning the universe," one gamer explained, using their hands to demonstrate. "You don't need to follow the intended path. You just need to find the right angle to clip through space-time." As Anna watched the unlikely collaboration unfold, she couldn't help but laugh. The galaxy's greatest minds had spent centuries trying to solve these equations properly, while humans had accidentally been practicing similar physics manipulation just to play games faster. She looked at her clock. It had been only 12 hours since involving the gaming community. At this rate, they might have a working theory before dinner. Not bad for a species that had just joined the galactic community. Sometimes, she muttered to herself, The best way to solve a problem is to break it first. The conference room at the university had transformed into a strange mix of scientific laboratory and gaming center. Screens covered every wall, showing both complex mathematical formulas and video game physics demonstrations. Empty pizza boxes and energy drink cans were scattered around as the unlikely team worked through their 18th straight hour. Jack stood at the main screen, his controller in hand, demonstrating another physics exploit from Portal Infinity. Behind him, 3 mathematicians scribbled furiously on tablets, converting his movements into equations. Professor Anna White watched in amazement as the 2 worlds merged into something entirely new. "See, when you hit this corner at exactly 47.3 degrees, Jack explained, his character clipping through what should have been a solid wall. The game engine can't properly calculate the collision. It thinks you're both inside and outside at the same time." One of the mathematicians, Dr. Ross, nearly dropped his tablet. "That's it. That's exactly what we need for the quantum tunneling effect in the ring equations." His fingers flew across the screen as he modified the formulas. "We don't need to solve the paradox. We need to exploit it." The room buzzed with renewed energy. For 3 centuries, the galaxy's finest minds had tried to find a perfect solution to stabilize a wormhole. But these humans were taking a different approach. They were looking for ways to break physics itself, in just the right way. A young speedrunner named Mike pulled up another game demonstration. "Look at this technique we use to bypass the loading zones. The game thinks we're in 2 places at once because we're moving faster than it can update our position." Anna's eyes widened. She quickly pulled up the ring equations, focusing on the section about quantum positioning. "What if we apply the same principle? Instead of trying to maintain perfect stability throughout the wormhole, we could create a cascade of micro-breaks in space-time." Dr. Ross finished her sentence. "Each one lasting just long enough to let matter through before the universe can notice the violation." The room erupted in excitement. Gamers and scientists crowded around screens, each bringing their unique perspective to the problem. The gamers understood how to break systems in precise, controlled ways. The scientists knew how to translate these exploits into mathematical language the universe would understand. Hours flew by as they refined their solution. They weren't trying to build a perfect wormhole anymore. They were building a series of controlled physics exploits that would create a stable passage through space. It was messy, inelegant, and completely brilliant. "It's like a speedrun through space," Jack said, grinning as he watched the simulations run. "We're not following the intended path between points A and B. We're glitching through the wall of reality itself." The final piece clicked into place when a tired programmer noticed something in the old simulation data. The failed attempts by other species had actually been close to working. They just didn't know it. What they saw as errors in their calculations were actually potential exploit points. Anna looked at the clock. 22 hours had passed since they started this crazy collaboration. On her screen, the final simulation was running. The numbers flowed perfectly, each physics exploit leading into the next in a beautiful cascade of controlled chaos. "We did it," she whispered, then louder, "We did it." The room erupted in cheers. Scientists hugged gamers. Gamers high-fived mathematicians. Someone popped open a bottle of champagne. They had solved in less than a day what the galaxy couldn't solve in 3 centuries. As Anna prepared to send their solution to the Galactic Council, she couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. The solution to the greatest mathematical problem in the galaxy had come from humans who spent their free time trying to break video games. Dr. Ross walked up beside her, shaking his head in amazement. "You know what's really funny?" he said. "If any other species had tried this approach, they would have considered it a failure. They were all looking for perfection. Only humans would look at a broken physics engine and think, 'Hey, we can use this.'" The solution was ready to send. Anna looked around the room one last time, at the bizarre mix of energy drinks and equations, of game controllers and quantum physics simulations. This was humanity at its finest, turning play into revolution, breaking rules to make new ones, and solving the impossible simply because nobody told them they couldn't. Gray stared at the data packet from Earth, all four of his eyes blinking in rapid succession. His head tendrils coiled tightly in confusion as he read through the solution again. And again. And again. The mathematics were sound, but the approach was so bizarre that his mind initially refused to accept it. They did what? He asked the empty room, his voice barely a whisper. The solution had arrived just hours ago, and he had locked himself in his private office to review it. On his desk, 3 different holographic projections showed various aspects of the human solution. Each one challenged everything he thought he knew about physics. A soft chime announced the arrival of Blue, who floated into the office with an unusual speed. Gray, have you seen these notes? The humans are suggesting we deliberately create physics exploits. They want us to break universal constants on purpose. I know, Gray said, his silver skin shifting colors with emotion. And the worst part is, it works. Look at these simulations. He pulled up the test results that had been running nonstop since the solution arrived. Every single one showed successful wormhole formation. The door burst open as more scientists poured into the office. Each carried their own analysis of the human solution. The room quickly filled with excited chatter and confused exclamations. They learned this from games. One scientist asked, their crystalline form vibrating with disbelief. Entertainment programs designed for children. Not exactly children's games, Gray corrected, pulling up some of the supplementary materials the humans had sent. Look at these speedrunners. They'd been practicing physics manipulation for decades, treating it like a sport. They don't just play these games. They break them apart and study how they break. The central computer's voice cut through the chaos. Simulation number 47 complete. All parameters within acceptable ranges. Wormhole stability achieved through controlled physics exploitation. A heavy silence fell over the room. 300 years of proper methodical science had failed to solve the ring equations. Then humans had shown up and treated the universe itself like a game to be broken. We need to present this to the full council, Blue said quietly. But how do we explain that the solution came from playing? Gray's head tendrils slowly relaxed as he made a decision. We tell them the truth. The humans found a solution because they weren't bound by our assumptions. While we tried to build perfect doors through space, they found the cracks we never thought to look for. The presentation to the Galactic Council, an hour later, was unlike any in its history. Gray stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species and explained how humans had solved the unsolvable by treating the universe as a system to be exploited rather than a problem to be solved. In essence, he explained, pointing to a simulation, their solution doesn't try to create a perfect wormhole. Instead, it creates a series of controlled physics violations that cascade into a stable passage through space-time. They're not so much building a tunnel as they are glitching through reality. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices. Some members were outraged at the inelegance of the solution. Others were fascinated by its sheer audacity. A few simply sat in stunned silence. But it's not proper science. One council member protested. They're breaking fundamental laws of physics. No, Gray corrected, his silver skin glowing with newfound excitement. They're using the laws of physics in ways we never imagined. The math is perfect. We just never thought to approach it this way. He pulled up the final simulation, showing how the human solution created a stable wormhole using less energy than anyone had thought possible. They showed us that our greatest mistake was trying to be perfect. The universe doesn't care about proper or improper solutions. It only cares about what works. As the council watched the simulation complete successfully for the 48th time, Gray felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Hope. The humans hadn't just solved the ring equations. They had shown the galaxy an entirely new way of thinking. Perhaps, he said, his head tendrils swaying gently, it's time we all learned how to play a little more. The test chamber hummed with energy as final preparations were made for the first practical test of the human solution. Professor Anna White stood next to Gray, both watching through reinforced windows as the machinery powered up. The room was packed with observers from every spacefaring species, all holding their breath. Tom Baker paced nervously behind them, occasionally glancing at his tablet where messages from Earth's gaming community poured in. They had insisted on watching the test live, and no one had the heart to refuse them. After all, they were as much a part of this as anyone. Beginning power-up sequence, announced the central computer. The massive ring-shaped device in the center of the test chamber began to glow with a soft blue light, implementing physics exploit sequence as specified. Anna couldn't help but smile as she watched the alien engineers follow the procedure that had been inspired by video game speedrunners. The technical language might have been different, but the principles were the same. Find the weak points in reality and press against them in just the right way. First exploit point established, the computer reported. A small shimmer appeared in the air inside the ring. Second exploit point forming. Cascade sequence initiating. Gray's head tendrils twitched with nervous energy. "It's following the predicted pattern," he said, his 4 eyes fixed on the readings. "Energy usage is significantly lower than our previous attempts." The shimmer in the air grew larger, forming what looked like a soap bubble in space. Inside it, reality itself seemed to bend and twist. The observers murmured as they watched physics being deliberately broken in a controlled way for the first time in galactic history. Cascade sequence at 50%, the computer announced. No anomalies detected. Continuing exploitation of space-time constants. One of the gaming community members who had helped solve the equations had described it perfectly. "It's like using a ladder skip in Portal Infinity. You're not supposed to be able to get there that way. But if you hit everything in the right order, the game, the universe, has to accept it." The bubble continued to grow, its surface rippling with mathematical precision. Each ripple represented another physics exploit stacked on top of the previous one, creating a stable pathway through space where none should exist. Cascade sequence complete, the computer announced. Final exploit point established. Wormhole formation beginning. The bubble suddenly collapsed inward, leaving behind a perfectly circular opening in space. Through it, they could see the target location, a similar test chamber on a space station orbiting Jupiter. The whole process had taken less than 5 minutes and used barely a fraction of the power they had expected to need. "Send through the test probe," Gray ordered, his voice steady despite his obvious excitement. A small drone floated toward the wormhole. As it passed through the opening, its sensors transmitted a constant stream of data. Every screen in the control room displayed the readings in real time. "Probe has successfully transited," the computer confirmed. "All readings nominal. Receiving transmission from Jupiter Station. Probe has emerged exactly at targeted coordinates. No degradation in signal or structure." The control room erupted in cheers. 300 years of failure had been overcome in hours by humans who treated physics like a game to be mastered. The impossible had become possible because someone fought to ask, "What if we just break it a little?" Anna felt tears in her eyes as she watched the wormhole shimmer stably in the test chamber. Her nephew Jack had messaged her just before the test. "Remember, Aunt Anna, every game is breakable if you're creative enough. Turns out the universe works the same way." Gray turned to her, his silver skin glowing with joy. "Your species has given us something more valuable than just the solution to the ring equations," he said. "You've shown us that play and discovery are 2 sides of the same coin. We've been so focused on following the rules that we forgot to ask why the rules existed in the first place." Tom stepped forward, grinning broadly. "That's the thing about humans," he said. "We don't just break rules. We break them carefully, precisely, and then we turn those breaks into bridges. Sometimes the best solutions come from asking why not, instead of why." The wormhole hummed softly, a testament to humanity's unique approach to problem solving. In the end, The greatest scientific breakthrough in galactic history hadn't come from a sophisticated laboratory or a supercomputer, but from humans who spent their free time trying to break games in new and interesting ways. 6 months after the successful wormhole test, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The massive chamber that once housed frustrated mathematicians had been transformed into something entirely new. Gaming consoles sat next to quantum computers, and alien scientists worked alongside human speedrunners to discover new physics exploits. Gray stood in his office, watching through the window as a young crystal collective researcher excitedly showed a human gamer how their species perceived quantum states. On another desk, a group of plant consciousness scientists were learning about sequence breaking from a teenager who had held multiple world records in Portal Infinity. The latest wormhole network updates are ready for review, Blue announced, floating into the office. The humans have found 3 new physics exploits that could reduce power consumption by another 30%. Gray nodded, his silver skin shimmering with contentment. The solution to the ring equations had been just the beginning. Once humans showed the galaxy that physics could be broken safely, every species started looking at science differently. In the main hall, a new display had replaced the wall of contributors. Now it showed the fastest known routes through space, complete with speedrunning-style leaderboards. Species competed to find more efficient paths, treating interstellar travel like a game to be optimized. Tom Baker walked into Gray's office, carrying his ever-present tablet. "You won't believe what just happened," he said, grinning. A group of Stellar Alliance physicists just submitted their first speedrunning video. They found a way to clip through subspace that nobody had thought of before. "The galaxy is learning to play," Gray said, his head tendrils swaying gently. "My own children now spend hours in simulation chambers, trying to break physics in new ways. Their test scores have never been better." The Galactic Council had created an entirely new division called the Department of Unconventional Solutions. Its logo showed a game controller crossed with a scientific calculator. Their motto, suggested by a human gamer, simply read, "Reality is just a speedrun waiting to happen." Professor Anna White had been named the department's first director. She had insisted that half of all positions be filled by people who had never worked in traditional science. Game designers worked alongside theoretical physicists. Speedrunners taught classes on exploit discovery to alien scientists. The humans are requesting permission to host something called a physics break convention, Blue reported, displaying the proposal. They want to gather speedrunners and scientists from all species to share techniques and compete in finding new exploits. "Approve it immediately," Gray said. He had learned that human gatherings like this often produced the most unexpected breakthroughs. The last one had resulted in a way to clip through solar radiation, making ships nearly immune to solar flares. In universities across the galaxy, applied gaming theory had become a required course for physics students. The textbook, co-written by Dr. Ross and Jack, was filled with terms that would have seemed absurd a year ago: reality clipping, physics frame perfects, and quantum sequence breaking. Tom's tablet chimed with another message from Earth. "Remember that gaming museum they wanted to build?" he asked. "The council just approved it. They're calling it the Galactic Institute of Interactive Physics Innovation." Gray walked to the window, watching as more ships appeared through the newly established wormhole network. Each one represented a victory over what was once thought impossible. The ships used routes that had been optimized by gamers, protected by physics exploits discovered through play. "You know what the best part is?" Tom said, joining him at the window. "Nobody's afraid to fail anymore. They've all learned that sometimes you have to fail 1,000 times before you find the perfect clip through spacetime." In gaming lounges across the galaxy, alien children now dreamed of becoming physics speedrunners. They watched videos of famous exploits, practiced breaking local physics in safe simulation chambers, and imagined finding the next big skip through spacetime. The universe, it turned out, wasn't a rigid set of rules to be followed. It was a game to be played, a system to be understood, and occasionally broken. And humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't just solving the ring equations, it was teaching everyone how to play. As Gray watched another ship disappear through a perfectly exploited hole in reality, he remembered something the human gamer had told him. The universe has bugs because it was made to be played with. We're all just speedrunners in the biggest game ever made. And the game, it seemed, was only beginning.